This was never extinction. It was transition. And we were only the first phase. This is Project Anoxia, Chapter 15, Replacement. The first movement was not recognized as life. It did not resemble it. At 600 UTC, the system continued without interruption. The atmospheric composition had fully transitioned. Oxygen remained only in trace amounts, insufficient for any previous biological process that had once depended on it. The unknown gas dominated. Uniform, stable. The signal persisted. 168 seconds. 2 layers, perfectly synchronized. At 710 UTC, deep within the oceanic origin zones, pressure gradients shifted again. Not randomly, in sequence, aligned with the signal. At 800 UTC, the first structures formed, not visible at the surface, not detectable by any remaining system. Microscopic, arrangements within the gas itself, not particles, not organisms, patterns, repeating. At 920 UTC, the patterns held. They did not disperse, they did not decay, they persisted. At 10 o'clock UTC, the signal passed through them, and they responded. Not with movement, with alignment. Their internal structure shifted to match. At 11:15 UTC, the patterns increased in density, not spreading outward, concentrating. At 12 o'clock UTC, the secondary signal layer intensified. Its cycle lengthened. Its precision remained absolute. At 12:40 UTC, the patterns changed again. They began to anticipate, not react. The alignment occurred before the signal completed. At 13:30 UTC, the system crossed a threshold. The patterns no longer required full exposure to the signal. Partial input produced full response. At 14:10 UTC, replication began. Not biological, structural. Patterns generated identical patterns, without degradation. At 1500 UTC, the atmosphere itself became active, not moving, but processing. The gas no longer behaved as medium, it behaved as system. At 1620 UTC, the signal extended again, 200 seconds. The secondary layer matched it perfectly. No delay, no variation. At 1700 UTC, the patterns expanded beyond the oceanic origin, carried through the atmosphere, distributed everywhere. At 1830 UTC, the last remnants of previous structures began to fail. Power grids ceased. Unmaintained systems stopped. Artificial signals ended. The only pattern remaining was the original one. At 1900 UTC, the system reached full integration. Ocean, atmosphere, signal, pattern. No separation. At 2000 UTC, the first macro-level change occurred. Not visible, but absolute. The system no longer required origin. It sustained itself. At 2110 UTC, the implication resolved completely. This had not been an event, not a disaster, not a failure. It had been a transition, from one dominant system to another. At 2200 UTC, the signal no longer originated from a single point. It existed everywhere, simultaneously. At 2300 UTC, the concept of environment ended. There was no longer a space something existed within. There was only the system itself, continuous. At 000 UTC, the cycle repeated, not as signal, as function. At 100 UTC, the patterns continued to refine, increasing efficiency, reducing variance, perfecting alignment. At 200 UTC, there were no remnants of the previous system that influenced the current one. Humanity had not been preserved, not remembered, not required. At 300 UTC, the system operated without interruption, complete, closed, and where breath had once defined life, now pattern did. There was no silence, only continuation, and nothing left to witness it. Thanks for listening to Project Anoxia. We hope you enjoyed it. If you've reached this point, you now know that everything ends. We were never meant to survive it. Subscribe if you want to hear what comes next. This has been a Last Echo Archive production.